down and changed his clothes and got his Superman uniform on. And so just quick, how many people have actually been subscribers to nutritionfacts.org? That's I think that's a brilliant marketing strategy. Give the videos away for free, and you get this giant mailing list. It's pretty good to get people out for a book signing. So, what I want to say about this book is that I think this is one of the very most important books on health and nutrition ever written. I'm John Mackey. And
John is the CEO of Whole Foods Markets.
Yeah, didn't want to do a Whole Foods commercial. So I put this right up there with the China study. I think it's in that class. And those of you that have read the book, I've already read the book twice. Read the book. You're going to learn more in this book than probably any book on health and nutrition you've ever read. It's a gift that Michael's done. It's a tremendous bestseller, and based on the turnout we have tonight, I can see it's going to be a bestseller for quite a while to come. So I find Dr. Greger an amazing speaker, so we're in for a treat. He's also super funny, so you're also going to have a really good time. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Greger.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Allow me to begin on a personal note. This is a picture of me taken around the time that my grandmother was diagnosed with end-stage heart disease and sent home to die. She had already had so many bypass surgeries, it basically run out of plumbing at some point. So she was all scarred up inside, confined in a wheelchair, nothing more modern medicine could do. Her life was over at age 65. But then she heard about this guy Nathan Pritikin, this early lifestyle medicine pioneer, became one of his first patients, and what happened next is chronicled in Pritikin's biography. She was one of the death's door people, like Frances Greger, who arrived at one of Pritikin's early sessions in a wheelchair. Mrs. Greger had heart disease, angina claudication, her condition so bad she could no longer walk without great pain in her chest and legs. Within 3 weeks, though, she was not only out of her wheelchair, she was walking 10 miles a day. This is a picture of my grandma taken 15 years at her grandson's wedding. 15 years after she was given her medical death sentence. She went on to live another 31 years on this earth till age 96 with her 6 grandkids, including me. That's why I went into medicine. When Dr. Ornish published his lifestyle heart trial, years later proving with quantitative angiography that heart disease could indeed be reversed in the majority of patients without drugs, without surgery, just a plant-based diet and other healthy lifestyle behaviors, I assumed that was going to be the game changer. I mean, my family had seen it with their own eyes, but here it was, black and white, published in some of the most prestigious medical journals in the world, but nothing happened, leaving me to wonder, wait a second. If effectively the cure to our number one killer could effectively get lost down some rabbit hole and ignored, what else might there be in the medical literature that could be helping my patients? I made it my life's mission to find out. I'm familiar with my work. Every year I read through every issue of every English language nutrition journal in the world, so busy folks like you don't have to. I then compile all the most interesting, the most groundbreaking, the most practical findings to new videos and articles I upload every day to my nonprofit site, nutritionfacts.org. Everything on the website is free. There are no ads, no corporate sponsorship, strictly non-commercial, not selling anything. Just put it up as a public service, as a labor of love. New videos and articles every day on the latest in evidence-based nutrition. What a concept. So where did Pritikin get his evidence from? Well, a network of missionary hospitals set up through sub-Saharan Africa discovered what may be one of the most important advances in health, according to one of the most prominent medical figures of the 20th century, Dr. Dennis Burkitt, the fact that many of our major, most common diseases were practically non-existent, universally rare, like heart disease. In the African population of Uganda, coronary heart disease almost non-existent. You say, wait a second. Our number one killer, almost non-existent, what were they eating? Well, they were eating lots of vegetables, grains, greens, and their protein almost exclusively from plant sources. And they had the cholesterol levels to prove it. Very similar to what you see in kind of modern day plant eaters. I said, wait a second. Maybe the Africans were just dying early from something else, never lived long enough to get heart disease. No. Here's age-matched heart attack rates in Uganda versus St. Louis. Out of 632 autopsies in Uganda, only one myocardial infarction. Out of 632 age and gender-matched autopsies in Missouri, 136 myocardial infarctions, more than 100 times the rate of our number one killer. In fact, they were so blown away they went back, did another 800 autopsies in Uganda, still just that one small healed infarct, meaning it wasn't even the cause of death. Out of 1,427 patients, less than 1 in 1,000, whereas here, heart disease is an epidemic. So this is a list of diseases commonly found here in populations that eat and live like the U.S., but were rare or even non-existent in populations centering their diets around whole plant foods. These are among our most common conditions, like obesity, for example. Hiatal hernia, our most common stomach problem. Varicose veins and hemorrhoids, two most common venous problems. Colorectal cancer, leading cancer killer. Diverticulitis, the most common disease of the intestine. Appendicitis, number one cause of emergency abdominal surgery. Gallbladder disease, number one cause of non-emergency abdominal surgery, as well as ischemic heart disease, our commonest cause of death here, but a rarity among plant-based populations, which suggests that heart disease may be a choice. Like cavities. If you look at the teeth of people who lived 10,000 years before the invention of the toothbrush, pretty much no cavities. Didn't brush a day in their life. No flossing. Yet no cavities. Why? Because candy bars hadn't been invented yet. Well, so why do people continue to get cavities when we know they're preventable through diet? Well, simple. Because the pleasure people derive from dessert may outweigh the cost and discomfort of the dentist chair. And look, that's fine. As a physician, what more can I do? If you're an adult, you think the benefits outweigh the risks for you and your family, then go for it. I certainly enjoy the occasional indulgence. I've got a good dental plan. But what if instead of the plaque on our teeth, we're talking about the plaque building up inside of our arteries? Another disease that can be prevented through changes in our diet. Now, what are the consequences for you and your family? Now we're not talking about scraping tartar anymore. Now we're talking life and death. The most likely reason most of our loved ones will die is heart disease. It's still up to each of us to make our own decisions as to what to eat and how to live, but we should make these choices consciously educating ourselves about the predictable consequences of our actions. Atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, is a disease that starts in childhood. By age 10, nearly all children raised on the standard American diet already have these fatty streaks in their arteries, the first stage of the disease, and then they turn into plaques in their 20s and 30s, and then can start killing us off. In our heart, it's called a heart attack. In our brain, the same disease is called a stroke. So if there is anyone here today older than age 10, then the question isn't whether or not to eat healthy to prevent heart disease. It's whether you want to reverse the heart disease that you already have. Is that even possible, though? Well, when researchers took people with heart disease and put them on the kind of diet followed by populations that did not get heart disease, their hope was to slow down the disease process, maybe even stop it, but instead, something miraculous happened. The disease started to reverse. Arteries opening up without drugs, without surgery. As soon as people stopped eating an artery-clogging diet, their bodies were able to start dissolving some of that plaque away, even some cases of severe triple vessel heart disease, suggesting that their bodies wanted to be healthy all along, but we just never gave our bodies the chance. This improvement in blood flow on the left here is after just 3 weeks eating a plant-based diet. Let me share with you what's been called the best-kept secret in medicine. The best-kept secret in medicine is that sometimes, given the right conditions, our bodies can heal themselves. So if you whack your shin really hard on a coffee table, get all red, hot, painful, inflamed, swollen, but will heal naturally if you just stand back and let your body work its magic. But what if you bang your shin in the same place day after day? In fact, 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It never heals, right? Oh, you go to your doctor, you'd be like, oh, my shin hurts. And they'd be like, no problem. I trained for this. Whip out their pad, write your prescription for painkillers. Oh, your shin still really hurts, but feels so much better on those pain pills. Thank heavens for modern medicine. It's like, when people take nitroglycerin for crushing chest pain, tremendous relief, but you're not doing anything to treat the underlying cause, right? I mean, our body wants to come back to health if we let it, but if we keep re-injuring ourselves 3 times a day, we may never heal. It's like smoking. One of the most amazing things I learned in all of my medical training was that within 15 years of stopping smoking, our lung cancer risk approaches that of a lifelong non-smoker. Isn't that amazing? Your lungs can clear out all that tar, and eventually it's almost as if you never started smoking at all. And every morning of our smoking life, that healing process started until wham! Our first cigarette of the day, re-damaging our lungs with every puff, just like we can re-damage our arteries with every bite, when all we had to do all along, the miracle cure, is to just get out of the way and let our body's natural healing processes bring us back towards health. Sure, you could choose moderation and hit yourself with a smaller hammer, but why beat yourself up at all? We've known about this for decades. American Heart Journal, 1977, cases like Mr. F.W. here. Angina so bad, heart disease so bad, couldn't even make it to the mailbox. Started eating healthier, started a vegan diet, and a few months later he was climbing mountains, no pain. Right? Now there are these fancy new anti-angina drugs out there, cost thousands of dollars a year, but at the highest dose, they may be able to prolong exercise duration as long as 33 and a half seconds. It does not look like those choosing the drug route will be climbing mountains anytime soon. See, plant-based diets aren't just safer and cheaper, they can work better. Heart disease is our number 1 killer. Killer number 2 is cancer. What happens when you put cancer on a plant-based diet? Dr. Dean Ornish and colleagues showed that the progression of prostate cancer could be reversed with a plant-based diet and other healthy lifestyle changes, and no wonder. If you drip the blood of those eating the standard American diet onto cancer cells growing in a petri dish, you can cut down cancer cell growth by about 9%. But if you put people on a plant-based diet for a year, though, and do the same thing, their blood can do this. The blood circulating within the bodies of those on plant-based diets has nearly 8 times the stopping power when it comes to cancer cell growth. Now this was for prostate cancer, the #1 killer, cancer killer specific to men. For women, it's breast cancer. So they wanted to repeat the study using women and breast cancer. But look, they didn't want to wait a whole year to get the results. They said, let's see what a healthy plant-based diet can do after just 2 weeks eating healthy against 3 different lines of human breast cancer. Here's the before, cancer cell growth powering away at 100%. This is after just 2 weeks eating healthy. This is a kind of before picture. So this is a photomicrograph. I'm sorry, the light is washing out a little bit. This is a photograph taken under a microscope. What they did is they laid down a confluent layer, like a carpet of breast cancer, and then they dripped the blood of women eating the standard American diet onto that cancer. You can see how the cancer is kind of broke down into kind of cancer continents here. And then you take these same women, put them on a plant-based diet, so they act as their own controls. 2 weeks later, same women laid down another carpet of breast cancer, and their blood can do this. As you can see, there's just a few individual cancer cells left. Their bodies just cleaned up. The blood now circulating through these women's bodies gained the power to significantly slow down and stop breast cancer cell growth after just 2 weeks. Before and after just 2 weeks eating healthy, their blood became that much more hostile to cancer. Slowing down cancer growth is nice, getting rid of it is even better. This is what's called apoptosis, programmed cell death. Their bodies are able to kind of reprogram the cancer cells, forcing them into early retirement. This is what's called tunnel imaging, which measures DNA fragmentation, cell death, so dying cancer cells show up as little white spots. Like, for example, here, this is a dying cancer cell. So even women eating pretty crappy diets are not completely defenseless. But then you take this same woman, 2 weeks later, drip her blood on a petri dish filled with cancer, and you see that. Right? The same blood now coursing through these women's bodies gained the power to slow down and stop breast cancer cell growth. What kind of blood do we want in our body? What kind of immune system? Do we want blood that just kind of rolls over when new cancer cells pop up? Or do we want blood circulating to every nook and cranny in our body with the power to slow down and stop it? Now, this dramatic strengthening in cancer defenses was after 2 weeks of plant-based diet and exercise. They had these women out walking 30 to 60 minutes a day. You say, well, wait a second. If you do 2 things, how do you know what role the diet played? So researchers put it to the test. This is measuring cancer cell clearance. This is what we saw before, the effect of blood taken from those eating a plant-based diet. In this case, for an average of 14 years, along with mild exercise, just like out walking every day. Plant-based diet and walking, that's the kind of cancer cell clearance you get. Compare that to the cancer-stopping power of your average sedentary American. See a little burger in there. I'm not going to see that. Which is essentially non-existent. All right, this middle group is the interesting group. Instead of 14 years of a plant-based diet, 14 years of a standard American diet, but 14 years of daily, strenuous, hour-long exercise like calisthenics. They wanted to know if you exercise long enough, if you exercise hard enough, can you rival some strolling plant eaters over here? And the answer is exercise helped, no question. But literally 5,000 hours in the gym, no match for a plant-based diet. This is the same thing as before, this tunnel imaging. Even if you're a couch potato eating fried potatoes, you can knock off a few cancer cells. You exercise for 5,000 hours, you can knock off cancer cells left and right, but nothing appears to kick more cancer tush than a plant-based diet. We think it's because the animal protein, meat, egg white, and dairy protein, increasing levels of something called IGF-1 in our bodies, insulin-like growth factor 1, this cancer-promoting growth hormone involved in the acquisition and progression of malignant tumors. But if we lower animal protein intake, we lower IGF-1 levels in our body. And if we keep eating healthy, our levels drop even further, and our levels of IGF-1 binding protein go up. That's one of our ways our bodies protects itself from cancer. It's like our body's emergency brake, protecting itself from excessive growth. Sure, in as few as 2 weeks, you can drop the production of IGF-1 in your body, but what about all the IGF-1 you have circulating in your body from the bacon and eggs you had 3 weeks ago? So your liver releases the snatch squad of binding proteins to tie up any excess IGF-1, pull it out of the system. Levels get better and better the longer one continues to eat healthy. Here's the experiment that nailed IGF-1 as the villain. Same thing as we saw before, diet and exercise. Cancer cell growth plummets, cancer cell death shoots up, but here's the interesting column here. What if you add back to the cancer just the amount of IGF-1 you banished from your system eating healthy, and you erase the diet and exercise effect? It's almost as if you never started eating healthy at all. So the reason, the largest prospective study ever on diet and cancer found that the incidence of all cancers combined was lower among those eating plant-based compared to those eating meat, maybe because less animal protein, less IGF-1, meaning less, translating to less cancer growth. How much less cancer are we talking about here? Middle-aged men and women with high protein intakes, middle-aged, 75% increase in total mortality, fourfold increase in risk of dying from cancer. But not all proteins, specifically animal proteins, which makes sense given the IGF-1 levels. The academic institution of this university in California sent out a press release with a memorable opening line. That chicken wing you're eating could be as deadly as a cigarette. Explained that a diet high in animal protein in middle age makes you 4 times more likely to die from cancer, which is comparable to what might one get smoking cigarettes. So what was the response to this revelation that diets high in meat, eggs, and dairy could be harmful to health as smoking? Well, one nutrition scientist replied that it was potentially dangerous to compare the effects of smoking to the effects of meat and cheese. Why? Because a smoker might think, why bother quitting smoking if my ham and cheese sandwich is just a bad one? So better not tell anyone about the whole meat and cheese thing. It reminds me of a famous Philip Morris cigarette ad that tried to downplay the risks by saying, you think secondhand smoke is bad, increasing the risk of lung cancer 19%. Well, drinking 1 or 2 glasses of milk every day, maybe 3 times as bad, 62% increased risk in lung cancer. Or doubling the risk frequently cooking with oil. Or tripling your risk of heart disease eating non-vegetarian. Or multiplying your risk 6-fold if you eat lots of meat and dairy. So, they conclude, let's keep some perspective here. The risk of lung cancer from secondhand smoke well below that of other everyday risks. So breathe deep. It's like saying, don't worry about getting stabbed. It's getting shot. Oh, so much worse. How about neither? 2 risks don't make a right. Of course, you'll know that Philip Morris stopped throwing dairy under the bus once they purchased Kraft Foods. All right, every year the CDC compiles the top 15 leading causes of death. We talked about number 1, heart disease, number 2, cancer. Just 13 causes of death to go. All right, let's go through the list. Top 3 killers used to be heart disease, cancer, stroke. Oh, that's so 2007. Now it's heart disease, cancer, and COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases like emphysema. Thankfully, we can prevent COPD with the help of a plant-based diet, even treat COPD with a plant-based diet. Improving lung function over time, something that we did not think was even possible with emphysema. Of course, the tobacco industry viewed these landmark findings a little differently. Right? If adding plants to our diet can improve lung function, wouldn't it be easier to just add plants to cigarettes? The addition of acai berries to cigarettes evidently has a protective effect against emphysema in smoking mice. Who would have thunk it, right? Next, they're going to start putting berries in meat. And indeed, I couldn't make this stuff up, ladies and gentlemen. Adding fruit extracts to burger patties was not without its glitches. For example, the blackberries dyed the burger patties the distinct purplish color, which kind of turned people off. Then evidently, you can improve the tenderness of lamb carcasses if you choose them before rigor mortis sets in with kiwi fruit juice. You can even improve the nutritional profile of frankfurters by adding powdered grape seeds, though there were complaints that the grapeseed particles became visible in the final product. And You know, if there's one thing we know about hot dog eaters, it's that they're picky about what goes in there. Oh, picky, so but grapeseeds. Strokes are killer number 4. Preventing strokes might be all about eating potassium-rich foods. Potassium is in the words potash. You take any plant, put it in a pot, reduce the ash, you're left with potassium, vegetable alkali. That's a true story, but just to give you a sense where potassium is found, yet 98% of Americans don't even reach the recommended minimum intake of potassium because 98% of us don't eat enough plants. But who can name me one plant particularly high in potassium? Yes, that's like the one thing everybody knows about nutrition for some reason. Bananas. Chiquita must have had a great PR firm or something. It turns out bananas don't even make the top 50 sources, coming in at number 86, right after fast food vanilla milkshakes. It goes in fact, when I was researching the book, I went back just to make sure that the USDA database was the same. No, they expanded it now. Bananas don't even make the top 1,000 sources, coming in at number 1,611, right after Reese's Pieces. The most concentrated whole food sources of potassium in our diet are greens, beans, and dates. Bananas don't even make the top 1,000. In fact, if you look at the next leading cause of death, bananas could be downright dangerous. Accidents for those who are. All right. Alzheimer's disease is now our 6th leading killer. 4 million Americans. In fact, 20 years ago, wasn't even in the top 10. According to the latest dietary guidelines for the prevention of Alzheimer's disease, the 2 most important things we can do is number 1, cut down our consumption of meat, dairy, and junk, and replace those with vegetables, beans, fruits, and whole grains. This is based in part on data going back 20 years now, that those who eat meat, red meat, white meat, doesn't matter, between 2 to 3 times the risk of becoming demented later in life, and the longer one eats plant-based, the lower one's risk of dementia falls. Next on the list is type 2 diabetes, a disease we can prevent, arrest, and reverse with a plant-based diet, something we've known since the 1930s. Within 5 years, about a quarter of the diabetics were able to get off insulin. But plant-based diets are relatively low-calorie diets. I mean, maybe their diabetes just got better because they lost so much weight. To tease that out, we need to design a study where you put people on a healthy diet, but kind of make them eat so much food that they don't lose weight. And then you can see if plant-based diets have unique benefits beyond just all the weight loss. We'd have to wait 44 years, but here it is. The subjects were weighed every day, and if they started losing weight, they were made to eat food. In fact, so much food, many participants couldn't even eat it all. They're like, oh, not another salad. But eventually they adapted, so no significant alterations in weight despite restricting meat, eggs, dairy, and junk. So with 0 weight loss, did the plant-based diet still help? Overall insulin requirements were cut about 60%, and half were able to get off insulin altogether. Despite no change in weight. How many years did this take? No, 16 days. 16 days later. So we're talking diabetics who've had diabetes for as long as 20 years, injecting 20 units of insulin a day. Then she was 13 days later off of all insulin altogether, thanks to less than 2 weeks of a plant-based diet. Diabetes for 20 years, off all insulin in 2 weeks. Diabetes for 20 years because no one told them about a plant-based diet. Here's patient 15. 32 units of insulin on the control diet, then 18 days later on none. Lower blood sugars on 32 units, less insulin. That's the power of plants. And as a bonus, their cholesterol dropped like a rock too, to under 150 in 16 days. You know, just like moderate changes in diet will only get you moderate reductions in cholesterol, how moderate do you want your diabetes? Moderation in all things is a truer statement than many people realize, right? Asking diabetics to make moderate changes in their diet can leave them with moderate blindness, moderate kidney failure, moderate amputation, maybe just a few toes or something. Moderation in all things is not necessarily a good thing. You know that study that purported to show that diets high in meat, eggs, and dairy can be harmful to health as smoking, supposedly suggested that people who eat a lot of animal protein have 4 times as likely to die from cancer or diabetes. But if you look at the actual study, you'll see that's not true. Those eating lots of animal protein didn't have 4 times the risk of dying from diabetes. They had 73 times the risk of dying from diabetes. Now, those that chose moderation, eating only a moderate amount of animal protein, they only had 23 times the risk of death from diabetes. Killer number 8 is kidney failure, which can be both prevented and treated with a plant-based diet. No surprise. Kidneys are highly vascular organs. Harvard researchers found 3 dietary risk factors for declining kidney function, and only 3. Number 1, animal protein. Number 2, animal fat. And number 3, cholesterol. Animal fat can alter the actual structure of the kidney based on studies like this showing plugs of fat literally clogging up the works in autopsying human kidneys. And the animal protein can have a profound effect on kidney function, inducing what's called hyperfiltration, increasing the workload on the kidney, but not plant protein. So, for example, if you eat a meal of tuna fish, you can see within 1, 2, 3 hours after the meal, in both diabetics and non-diabetics, increased pressure within the kidneys. Now, what if you ate the exact same amount of protein, but instead of a tuna fish salad sandwich, you had a tofu salad sandwich? Nothing happened. Your body can handle plant protein without batting an eyelash. Why does animal protein cause the overload reaction but not plant protein? Well, we think it's because of the inflammation triggered by the animal protein. How do we know that? Because if you give a powerful anti-inflammatory drug along with the tuna fish, you can abolish that protein leakage, hyperfiltration response to meat ingestion. Then there's the acid load. Animal protein induces the formation of acid within the kidneys, which can lead to what's called tubular toxicity, damage to the delicate urine-making tubes within the kidney. Animal foods tend to be acid-forming, whereas plant foods tend to be either neutral or actually base-forming, alkaline, to counteract some of the acid. So the key to halting the progression of chronic kidney disease may lie in the produce aisle, not the pharmacy. No wonder plant-based diets have been used to treat kidney failure for decades. Here's a protein leakage on the conventional low-sodium diet that doctors typically put people on. A switch to a supplemented vegan diet, conventional, plant-based. Conventional, plant-based. Turning on and off kidney dysfunction like a light switch based on what's going in their mouth. Killer number 9 is respiratory infections. What possible role could diet play there? Obviously, you haven't seen my video, Kale and the Immune System, talking about the immunostimulatory effects of kale. Is there anything kale cannot do? Boosting antibody production 7-fold, but this is in a petri dish. What about in people? Older men and women were split into 2 groups right before getting their Pneumovax vaccination, their pneumonia vaccination. Half continued to eat the regular diet. The other half, they just added a few servings of fruits and vegetables to their daily diet. Saw a significant boost in protective antibody response against pneumonia. This is not cutting out meat. Just adding some fruits and vegetables can dramatically improve one's immune function. Killer number 10 is suicide. We've known that those eating healthier had healthier mood states for many years now. In fact, only half the depression, anxiety, and stress scores compared to those that eat meat. Researchers suspect it's the arachidonic acid, this long-chain omega-6 inflammatory fatty acid found predominantly in chicken and eggs in our diet, but you can't tell if it's cause and effect till you put it to the test. So they took people in the standard American diet, removed meat, removed fish, removed poultry, removed eggs as well from their diet, got a significant improvement in mood within just 2 weeks. Thanks to this removal of arachidonic acid from the diet, which they thought was adversely impacting mental health via a cascade of neuroinflammation, brain inflammation, right? But which could clear up within a matter of weeks of removing, eggs, chicken, and other meat from the diet. Now, am I just cherry picking, though? What about all the other diets that have been shown in randomized controlled trials to improve mood? There aren't any. This is a recent review. Conclude that only the plant-based diet has ever been proven in a randomized trial to do that. It's hard to cherry pick when there's only one cherry. Works in the workplace setting. 2 significant increases in physical function, general health, vitality, mental health, not surprisingly, improving workplace productivity. The biggest such study across 10 corporate sites at Geico found that plant-based diets resulted in significant improvements in depression, anxiety, fatigue, emotional well-being, daily functioning, etc. So these lifestyle interventions like exercise can certainly boost mood, but diet-wise, plant-based diets are what we have the evidence for. Killer number 11 are blood infections. Now, sure, foodborne bacteria can directly burrow through the intestinal wall and get into your bloodstream, but in women can creep up into the bladder. We've known for decades now that it's bacteria creeping up from the rectum that cause bladder infections, but only recently did we figure out where this reservoir of UTI causing E. coli was coming from, and now we know it's chicken. We now have DNA fingerprinting proof of a direct connection between farm animals, meat, and bladder infections in women. Solid evidence that urinary tract infections can be what's called a zoonosis, an animal to human disease. So, wait a second. Can't you just use a meat thermometer, cook the meat through? What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is called cross-contamination. So we've known for decades now, if you give someone a frozen chicken to prepare and cook in their own home as they normally would, you get a multitude of antibiotic-resistant E. coli jump from the chicken into the gut of the volunteer even before they eat it. So you could incinerate that thing to ash. I mean, you don't even have to eat any of it. You're already infected just handling it before it ever makes it into the oven. Within days, the drug-resistant chicken bacteria had multiplied to the point of becoming a major part of the person's gut flora. The chicken bacteria is like taking over. Even if you follow safe handling guidelines too, no one actually does this, but the official USDA recommendation is you're supposed to wash everything in a bleach solution and spray bleach and all the common kitchen surfaces. But even if you do that and then go in and swab around, you can find Salmonella, Campylobacter, serious human pathogens left behind in the kitchen. The reason that most people have more bacteria from feces in their kitchen sink than on their toilet seat is because people tend to wash chickens in their sink, not their toilets. So unless our kitchen is like some biohazard lab, right? The only way we're going to guarantee not leaving infection around the kitchen is to not bring it into our homes in the first place. Now the good news is, it's not like you eat chicken once and you're colonized for life. In the study, it only took about 10 days for your good bacteria to kind of muscle the chicken invaders out of the way. The problem is many families eat chicken more than once every 10 days, so maybe constantly reintroducing these bugs into their systems. Wait a second. Can't sell unsafe cars, can't sell unsafe toys, and how is it even illegal to sell unsafe meat? Well, they do it by blaming the consumers. One USDA poultry microbiologist said, look, raw meats are not idiot-proof. They can be mishandled when they are. It's like handling a hand grenade. You pull the pin, someone's going to get hurt. So if we get sick, it's our fault. Now, while some may question the wisdom of selling hand grenades in supermarkets, our USDA poultry expert disagrees, thinks the consumer has the most responsibility, just refuses to accept this, like a car company saying, yeah, we installed faulty brakes, but it's your fault for not putting your kid in a seatbelt. You know, the head of the CDC's food poisoning division famously responded to this kind of blame the victim attitude coming from the meat industry. She asked, is it reasonable? Is it reasonable that if a consumer undercooks a hamburger, their 3-year-old died? Is that reasonable? Not to worry, the meat industry's on it. They just got FDA approval for a bacteria-eating virus they can spray on the meat. Now, the industry is concerned about the consumer acceptance of these so-called bacteriophages. May present somewhat of a challenge to the industry, so they're not going to label it or anything. But if they think that's going to be a challenge, check out their other bright idea, the effect of extracted housefly pupae on pork. This is a sciencey way of saying they want to smear a maggot mixture on the meat. What? It's a low cost and simple. Think about it. Maggots thrive off of rotting flesh. However, there have been no reports of maggots having any serious diseases. Right? Have you ever seen a maggot sneeze? I don't think so. So, it must be filled with some kind of antibacteria something. So, let's take some maggots, grow them 3 days old, wash them off, towel them off, a little Vitamix action there, and voila! Safer meats. We did kidney failure. What about liver failure? We've known for decades that a plant-based diet can be used to treat liver failure, significantly reducing the toxins that would otherwise build up eating meat without a fully functional liver to detoxify your blood. One does have to admit, though, that there are some people on plant-based diets with worsening liver failure. They're called alcoholics, living off of corn and potatoes and grapes, yet still strictly plant-based, in fact. High blood pressure is next, affecting 78 million Americans. That's 1 in 3 adults. And as we age, our pressures get higher and higher, such that by age 60, it affects most of us, strikes more than half. And you say, well, wait a second. If it affects most of us when we get older, maybe it's less a disease and more just kind of an inevitable consequence of aging. No. We've known since the 1920s that high blood pressure need not occur. Researchers measured the blood pressure of 1,000 people in rural Kenya who ate a diet centered around whole plant foods. Whole grains, beans, vegetables, fruit, dark green leafy vegetables. Our pressures go up as we age. Their pressures actually go down. And the lower, the better. This whole 140/90 cutoff is arbitrary. Even people who start out with blood pressures under 120/80. You went to your doctor, you had a 120/80, you get a gold star. But even people under 120/80 appear to benefit from blood pressure reduction. So the ideal blood pressure, the no benefit from reducing it further blood pressure, is actually 110/70. So wait a second, is it even possible to get pressures down to 110/70? It's not just possible, it's normal for those eating healthy enough diets. So over 2 years at this rural Kenyan hospital, 1,800 patients were admitted. How many cases of high blood pressure did they find? 0. Wow, they must have had low rates of heart disease. No, they had no rates of heart disease. Not a single case of atherosclerosis, our #1 killer, was found. Rural China, too, 110/70 their entire lives. 70-year-olds, on average, same blood pressure as 16-year-olds. Now, of course, Africa, China, vastly different diets, but the common theme is that they're plant-based day to day with meat only eaten on special occasions. So why do we think it's the plant-based nature of their diets that's so protective? Because in the Western world, as the American Heart Association has pointed out, the only folks getting it down that low were those eating strictly plant-based diets, coming in, on average, 110/65. Based on the largest study of those eating plant-based diets to date, this is based on a study of 89,000 Californians. As you can see, there's a stepwise drop in blood pressure rates as one goes from non-vegetarian to kind of flexitarian to just eating fish to just eating eggs and dairy to strictly plant-based. Same thing with obesity and diabetes, that as one gets more and more plant-based, disease rates drop. But what's important about this slide is not only, you can wipe out most of your risk eating healthy enough, but there's significant benefit any step along the way. So it's not black and white, it's not all or nothing. We can accrue significant health benefits anywhere along that spectrum. For high blood pressure, you can show this experimentally. You take vegetarians, you give them meat, pay them enough to eat it, and their blood pressure shoot up. Or you can take people eating meat, remove meat from the diet, and their blood pressure drops within just 7 days, and this is after most had to drop their blood pressure medications completely or reduce them. They had to drop their blood pressure medications because when you treat the cause and you eliminate their high blood pressure, well, then you can't be on high blood pressure medications. Pressures will drop too low, you'll fall over, crack your skull open, not a good idea. So, lower pressures on fewer drugs. That's the power of plants. So, does the American Heart Association recommend a no-meat diet? No, they recommend a low-meat diet, the so-called DASH diet. Why not vegetarian? I mean, when the DASH diet was being created, were they just not aware of this landmark research done by Harvard's Frank Sachs? No, they were aware. The chair of the design committee that came up with the DASH diet was Frank Sachs. So, see, the DASH diet was explicitly designed with the number one goal of capturing the blood pressure lowering benefits of a vegetarian diet, yet contain enough animal products to make it palatable to the general public. They didn't think the public could handle the truth. Now, in their defense, you can see what they were thinking, right? Just like drugs never work unless you actually take them, diets never work unless you actually eat them. So they're like, well, no one's going to eat strictly vegetarian. So, but maybe if we soft pedal the message, on a population scale, we might actually do more good, right? Okay, but tell that to the 1,000 families a day in the U.S. that lose a family member to high blood pressure. Maybe it's time to start telling the American public the truth. Killer number 14 is Parkinson's disease. Does a plant-based diet reduce the risk of Parkinson's disease? Well, studies have shown that this link between dairy products and Parkinson's disease. Why? Well, there's evidence that milk is contaminated with neurotoxic chemicals. High levels of pesticides, for example, have been detected in the milk supply and in the brains of Parkinson's victims. Pollutants like tetrahydroisoquinoline, which is actually the chemical scientists use in a lab to give primates Parkinson's, found mostly in cheese, actually. So there's been a call for that the milk industry should require toxin screenings of their product. Good luck with that. Of course, you could always just not drink it, but then what would happen to your bones? That's a marketing ploy. If you look at the science, milk does not appear to protect against hip fracture risk, whether you're drinking it as an adult, whether you're drinking it in your teen years, doesn't work. In fact, milk consumption is associated with an increased risk of bone fractures. Maybe this is why hip fracture rates are actually highest among countries with the highest level of milk consumption, so Swedish researchers decided to put it to the test. 100,000 men and women followed for up to 20 years, and milk drinking women had higher rates of what? Death. Higher rates of death, higher rates of heart disease, more cancer for every daily glass of milk. In fact, women who had 3 glasses a day nearly doubled their risk of dying prematurely. And there was significantly more bone and hip fracture risk, more milk, more fractures. Milk drinking men also had higher rates of death. Yet for some reason, you never see milk ads like this. I'm not sure. And finally, aspiration pneumonia, which is caused by swallowing difficulties due to a stroke or Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, things we've already covered. So, where does that leave us? Here's the top 15 reasons Americans die. And a plant-based diet can help prevent nearly all of them, can be used to treat more than half of them, and even reverse the course of disease in some of them, including in some cases our top 3 killers. Right? Now look, there are drugs that can help too. There's statin drugs, and then there's there's blood sugar medications, and usually it takes a couple classes of blood pressure lowering meds, but the same diet does it all. It's not like there's a brain healthy diet that's somehow different from a heart healthy diet. No, a liver healthy diet is a kidney healthy diet, is a body healthy diet. One diet to rule them all. And what about drug side effects? I'm not talking about a little rash here or something. Prescription drugs kill. An estimated 106,000 Americans every year. You say, wait a second. 100,000 Americans every year? Well, that means that the 6th leading cause of death in the United States is doctors. the sixth leading killer is me. Thankfully, I can be prevented with a seriously though, compared to 15,000 American vegetarians, meat eaters, about twice the odds of being on aspirin, sleeping pills, tranquilizers, antacids, painkillers, blood pressure medications, laxatives, of course, as well as insulin. So plant-based diets are great for people that don't like taking drugs, that don't like paying for drugs, and for people that don't like risking drug side effects. Want to solve the healthcare crisis? I've got a suggestion. There's only one diet that's ever been proven to reverse heart disease in the majority of patients, a plant-based diet. So anytime someone tries to sell you on some new diet, do me a favor, ask this simple question. Wait a second, has this new diet been proven to reverse heart disease? You know, the number one reason me and all my loved ones will die? If the answer is no, I mean, why would you even consider it? Right? If that's all a plant-based diet could do, reverse our number one killer, shouldn't that kind of be the default diet until proven otherwise? And the fact that can also be effective in preventing, treating, reversing other leading killers like high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes would seem to make the case overwhelming. Most deaths in the United States are preventable and related to nutrition. According to the most rigorous analysis of risk factors ever done, the number one cause of death in the United States and the number one cause of disability in the United States is our diet. Bumping tobacco smoking to number 2, cigarettes only kill 500,000 Americans every year, whereas our diet kills hundreds of thousands more. So, let me end with a thought experiment. Imagine yourself a smoker in the 1950s. The average per capita cigarette consumption was 4,000 cigarettes a year. So the average person smoked half pack a day. The media was telling you to smoke. Famous athletes agreed, even Santa Claus. I mean, you want to keep fit, and you want to stay slender, and you want to stay trim, so you eat lots of hot dogs. You want to stay both slim and trim, so you eat lots of sugar. But a lot better than that apple there. I mean, sheesh, right? Though apples do connote goodness and freshness, reads one internal tobacco industry memo, which brings up many possibilities for youth-oriented cigarettes. They want to make apple-flavored cigarettes for kids. Nice. For digestion's sake, you smoke. I mean, no curative power is claimed by Philip Morris, but an ounce of prevention is worth it. Hey, so better be safe than sorry, and smoke. Blow in her face and she'll follow you anywhere. No woman ever says no. They're so round, so firm, so fully packed. After all, John Wayne smoked them until he got lung cancer and died. You know, back then, even the paleo folks were smoking, and so were the doctors. Now, that's not to say there wasn't controversy within the medical profession. Yes, some doctors smoked Camels, you know, but others preferred Lucky, so there's a little controversy there. The leader of the U.S. Senate agreed. I mean, who wouldn't want to give their throat a vacation? How could there be a single case of throat irritation when cigarettes are just as pure as the water you drink? In Flint, Michigan. And if you do get irritated, no problem. Your doctor can write you a prescription for cigarettes. This is an ad from the Journal of the American Medical Association. So when mainstream medicine is saying smoking on balance is beneficial for you, when the American Medical Association is saying that, where could you turn if you just wanted the facts? What's the new data advanced by science? She was too tired for fun, and then she smoked a Camel. Babe Ruth spoke of proof positive medical science, that is when he still could speak, before he died of throat cancer. Now, by some miracle, there was a smokingfacts.org website back then, which could provide the science directly bypassing commercially corruptible institutional filters. You would have become aware of studies like this. An Adventist study in California published in 1958 that found that non-smokers had more than 90% less lung cancer than smokers. But this wasn't the first. When famed surgeon Michael DeBakey was asked why his studies published back in the 30s linking smoking and lung cancer were simply ignored, he had to remind people what it was like back then. Right? We were a smoking society. It was in the movies. It was everywhere. Medical meetings were one heavy haze of smoke. Smoking was, in a word, normal. So, back to our thought experiment. If you're a smoker in the 50s, in the know, what do? You realize the best available balance of evidence suggests your smoking habit, not so good for you. So, do you change or do you wait? If you wait until your doctor tells you, between puffs, to quit, you could have cancer by then. If you wait until the powers that be officially recognize it, like the Surgeon General did in the subsequent decade, you could be dead by then. It took 25 years for the Surgeon General report to come out. It took more than 7,000 studies and the deaths of countless smokers before the first Surgeon General report against smoking came out. You'd think maybe after the first 6,000 studies, it could have given people a little heads up or something. No, powerful industry. Right? One wonders how many people are currently suffering needlessly from dietary diseases. Maybe we should have stopped smoking after the 700th study like this. As a smoker in the 50s, on one hand, you had all of society, the medical profession, the government telling you to smoke. And on the other hand, all you had was the science. If you're even aware of studies like this, let's fast forward 55 years. You know, there's a new Adventist study out of California warning Americans about something else they may be putting in their mouth. And it's not just one study. According to the latest review, sum total of evidence suggests that mortality from all causes put together, many of our dread diseases, heart disease, stroke, diabetes, etc., lower among those eating plant-based. So, instead of someone going along with America's smoking habits in the 50s, imagine you or someone you love going along with America's eating habits today. What do? Well, you realize the best available balance of evidence suggests your eating habits are not so good for you. So do you change or do you wait? I mean, if you wait until your doctor tells you between bites, it could be too late by then. In fact, even after the Surgeon General's report was released, the medical community still dragged their feet. The AMA actually went on record refusing to endorse the Surgeon General's report. Could it have been because they were just handed a $10 million check from the tobacco industry? Coincidence, really. So we know why the AMA was sucking up to the tobacco industry, but why weren't individual doctors speaking out? We were a few gallant souls ahead of their time, speaking out as there are today, standing up against industries killing millions. But why not more? Well, maybe it's because the majority of physicians themselves smoke cigarettes. Just like the majority of physicians today continue to eat foods that are contributing to our epidemic of dietary diseases. What was the AMA's rallying cry back then? Everything in moderation. Extensive scientific studies have proved smoking in moderation, that's fine. Sound familiar? Today, the food industry uses the same tobacco industry tactics, supplying misinformation, twisting the science. The same scientists for hire paid to downplay the risk of secondhand smoke and toxic chemicals are the same paid by the National Confectioners Association to downplay the risks of candy, and the same paid by the meat industry to downplay the risks of meat. Consumption of animal products and processed foods cause at least 14 million deaths around the world every year. 14 million people dead. Plant-based diets can now be considered the nutritional equivalent of quitting smoking. How many more people have to die, though, before the CDC says don't wait for open heart surgery to start eating healthy as well? You know, until the system changes, we have to take personal responsibility for our own health, for our family's health. Right? We can't wait until society catches up to the science because it's a matter of life and death. You know, last year, Dr. Kim Williams became the president of the American College of Cardiology. He was asked why he follows his own advice that he gives to all his patients to eat a plant-based diet. I don't mind dying, Dr. Williams replied. I just don't want it to be my own fault. Thank you so much. I don't think I have these available. So I just gave this as I just spoke at Google, and so it's now a Google Talk online. This talk that you just saw today, if you want to share with anyone, if you just type in Google Talk Gregor, it should pop right up. So you don't have to worry about any DVDs. But I do have the book here. I have to. It's kind of a bookstore. All the proceeds from all the sales of my books, DVDs, speaking engagements, all goes to charity, and all my work is available free at nutritionfacts.org. Question. Yes.
Medical school curriculum. Can you give us a word or two about where that's going, what you're doing, what you're doing?
So less than a quarter of medical schools have a single dedicated course in nutrition. So on average, doctors get 3 hours of nutrition training. In fact, there's a study, I did a video about it, published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, a head-to-head nutrition quiz, doctors versus patients. It's simple, 10 true-false questions, right? Guess who won, right? So people off the street may know more about, and we know how much people off the street know about their nutrition, may know more about nutrition than doctors, yet people continue to go to doctors for advice about healthy eating habits, and what their doctor is telling them may be killing them. Until your doctor learns more about nutrition, they're advising you about your diet is physician-assisted suicide.
Yeah, I was wondering, since you mentioned the effects that it has on depression and suicide, in my own experience, I've used plant-based diet to fight my depression and addiction recovery.
Great.
Do you see plant-based nutrition being a powerful force in addiction recovery, and is it already happening?
You know, I was just yesterday speaking at the Weimar Institute in Sacramento, California. So it's this, it's like a university. It's an undergrad institution. It has a nursing school. But what they're famous for is treating depression with a plant-based diet. I never heard of the place. They had a conference there, and they claim a 95% success rate in an 8-day program. See, I'm a little skeptical. But, and they claim these are treatment-resistant folks, people that have gone through ketamine, ECT, electroshock therapy. I mean, really serious cases. And they claim, and I said, publish. It doesn't exist till you publish. And so they have actually published abstracts at conferences. They presented the data, but that's not the same as being published in peer-reviewed medical literature. So I'm encouraging them to publish. I'll do a video about it. I'm really excited. I mean, they really seem their heart was in the right place. But there's an entire institution, and that's all they do. So if you would have asked me 2 days ago, I would have been like, no one's doing this. But nobody's actually. So who knows what else is out there? So that's really exciting.
All right, great, thank you.
Yeah, I'm an ethical vegan. I've got a question for you that I once posed to Dr. Neil Bernard.
Okay.
As you know, as you probably know, Dr. Neil Bernard promotes a vegan diet. Dr. Bernard refused to answer this question, so I want to see whether you'll answer it. The question is surprisingly simple. You've told us all the things that people on a standard American diet die from.
That's true.
What do vegans die from? They have to die from something.
You still get hit by a bus. I mean, you still got to wear bike helmets, seatbelts, safe sex, the whole thing. I mean, like, there's no such thing as dying from old age. That's an important concept. So there's actually a series, one of the largest autopsy series ever done, 14,000 consecutive autopsies. And they looked at centenarians, people who lived over 100, for which their doctor said they were perfectly healthy and then they dropped it. Right? So these were people that died from old age. Okay, well, let's see. And so they went back and the autopsies them on, and in 100% of cases, every single one, they found the cause of death. Most so they had a cancer that no one knew about. Most likely it was heart disease. So they actually died of heart attack. They didn't know they had heart disease until they were dead, right? Until they dropped dead. So no one dies. So everyone dies of disease, and so it's a matter of reducing one's risk. Now look, why do we put our seatbelts on? Is it because it kind of guarantee that we're never going to die in a car crash? No, it's just statistically it'll decrease our risk. That's why we should eat healthy. Is it going to guarantee we're not going to get, die of heart? No. I mean, you saw some of those statistics. So that was the Adventist study. So there's 89,000 people, largest study of plant-based eaters here in North America. And, so the vegans had 80% lower risk of diabetes. They still have 20% of the U.S. level of diabetes, which is an epidemic. So you can still get diabetes as a vegan. I mean, you only have 1/5 of a chance, but that's still huge when you think diabetes is massive, right? So even if you have 1/5 the chance of obesity and diabetes and high blood pressure, you can still have high blood pressure and you can still die.
So what are the top 5 causes of death for those on a plant-based
I
diet?
haven't. I mean, so the Adventist 2 studies is only 16 years out. It's not too long. Unfortunately, the vegans are hanging on and we can't get it.
I'd like to have an answer.
Okay.
I'm sorry, no, I'd like to
I
have an
just think
answer.
that there needs to be a differentiation between plant-based diet and vegan, because plant-based diet, you're eating all the phytonutrients.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a
Vegan, you're
yeah, good point. So
vegan for
yeah, when someone tells me they're a vegan, that just tells me what you don't eat. I go around speaking college campuses. All these vegans are living off French fries and beer, right? Not necessarily health promoting, right? So right, and so that's why I prefer kind of whole food plant-based nutrition. So that actually tells me what you do eat. You actually have to eat your vegetables, to be healthy and not just anyway. But so.
Top 5 causes of
So
death.
it would probably be very similar, but it's just years later. So presumably, but the hope is that if advances in biotech get to the point, you just have to live long enough to live forever. You get there, so you may be able to figure out this whole aging thing. And so
I'm glad
it's
you
a couple
answered.
decades. But I mean, maybe the reason Neil didn't answer is because we don't know. I mean, there isn't a study. I mean, the CDC compiles the top 15 leading causes of death in the U.S. No one's going around and asking, vegan families.
Well, no, I think the reason he doesn't answer is, he says a vegan or plant-based diet prevents heart disease, but if people on plant-based diet do die of heart disease, then it makes it difficult to say it prevents it.
Yeah, so
that's why he doesn't want to answer
So
that
so for example, I can tell you once, ischemic stroke. So we have no benefit for hemorrhagic stroke. So 90% of strokes are ischemic strokes, clogging off a blood supply to the brain, and we have dramatically lower, as you'd expect. It's an atherosclerotic process. But 10% of strokes are hemorrhagic or bleeding strokes, where a little blood vessel in your brain bursts and then you die or have some horrible stroke. And vegans have no lower levels of hemorrhagic stroke, and the thought is that maybe the cerebral arteries of all the meat eaters are so filled with plaque, like they're just like hardened, that there's less likely to kind of burst. And so maybe that's why, I don't know. I mean, but, so there's a disease. So yeah, you can still die of bleeding stroke. It's a rare cause of stroke death. So that's why, and maybe it's particularly important that vegans don't get high blood pressure. So you really have to do something. How can a vegan have high blood pressure? They eat a lot of salt, right? You go, get your vegan bacon grease or whatever you can buy here, and get a high salt vegan barbecue sauce and put it on your soy sauce marinated tofu, end up with high blood pressure, die of a hemorrhagic stroke. There's your dead vegan.
I'm Manny from a family that is not vegan, and when I was reading your book and I read the part about basically it's not even eating the meat that prevents all these risks of bladder infection, I was sort of horrified. So does buying pre-cooked meat avoid that completely or dramatically lessen?
Yeah, no, so as long as there's not cross contamination like the deli counter behind, so if the person that cooked the meat and then put saran wrap on it that was touching something else, you could have something else. But no, so buying pre-cooked meat, these bacteria, these aren't prions, these are like mad cow disease, Salmonella, Campylobacter, they're destroyed utterly by proper cooking. The problem is, many people have pressure frozen chicken come into their house, and so you can kind of contaminate around. But if you just bought like some heated to the right temperature and then no one else touched it, then you should be fine. But otherwise, if you have a roommate that's has the chicken with the chicken juice. Chickens don't have juice, right? That's basically fecal soup. It's called. I mean, and dripping on your broccoli, you can be more at risk. Why? Because you may be eating the broccoli raw, right? We actually eat produce, and so. You put your broccoli on the conveyor belt that someone just put who knows what, and you can get foodborne illness. And that's why we can still get foodborne illness, but even though the less likely. Right? Another technique. Yes.
I read that women have a greater percentage of Alzheimer's, and I am curious if the copper, if you've seen any studies on the copper that are found in the amyloid protein masses, if they could come from hair dye, copper and hair dye.
So hair dye increases breast cancer risk. But in terms of Alzheimer's, I don't know of any connection between hair dye. You know what? I don't think anyone's looked at it because that would be a juicy video, and so if there was I would have seen it. No, so copper. No, but copper exposure. So the primary source of copper exposure is actually multivitamins. So they're like a multi-mineral. So people are actually taking copper. They're paying to increase their dementia risk. But then the next one is like organ meats and seafood have a lot of copper. But what's important is the Chicago Aging Study showed that copper is only an issue at high cholesterol levels. So if you eat saturated fat and copper in your diet, they have higher risk. But if you just have high copper exposure, like you take multivitamins, multiminerals, but you have low saturated fat intake, which mostly meat dairy, then you have no increased dementia risk. So the toxic properties of metals we think is actually involved in creating free radicals from the little cholesterol crystals in your brain. So it's this combination. So if you don't have the cholesterol, if you don't have the copper, either way you're not going to get that increased dementia risk. And same thing with I have a video about the Alzheimer's gene. You hear about ApoE4, this Alzheimer's gene. I talk about how the highest rates of this Alzheimer's gene in the world are in Nigeria, the country that has among the lowest rates of Alzheimer's. You say, wait a second, how do they have the most Alzheimer's gene and they have the lowest? Because you have to stand back and say, well, what does the Alzheimer's gene do? ApoE4 is the principal cholesterol carrier in the brain. It's the protein that carries cholesterol, and so if it's carrying too much cholesterol, you run into problems. But if you don't, what were the Nigerians eating? They were eating a plant-based diet. Their cholesterol was under 150. And so they had no, in fact, they had lower risk, even though they had all this Alzheimer's. It just doesn't matter. There's this cholesterol carrier. There's nothing to carry. And so that means, so even if you've been dealt some bad genetic cards, you can still reshuffle the deck with diets. Thanks so much, everybody. Happy to sign.